This is kind of a unique episode. I kind of made this up. I got something that actually just landed in my lap. I went and got to my mail, and there was a letter in there addressed to the person that lived in the apartment before me. And it was written from the Oregon State Prison. And I read through this, and it just kind of got my imagination going. I started researching this, and then Joe started researching it, and we came up. I'm going to read to you the letter I got. Now, this is from somebody who doesn't know this person. This is like a pen pal relationship. Monica, I hope this letter finds you in high spirits and the best of health. I know it's been a minute since you heard from me, and I'm sorry if you feel like I fell off on you. Some shit happened, and I ended up having to do over 5 months in the hole for fighting and other things. But that's a story for another time. I'm actually writing you to see how you've been, and with hopes that we can pick up where we left off. At the time we were talking, I was still around 3 years from the gate, and couldn't really see the light at the end of the tunnel. At the moment, I have less than 2 years left, and freedom is starting to feel more like a reality than a dream. With that being said, I really enjoyed our conversations, and you are somebody I want to keep in touch with and spend time around when I finally get out of prison. If you're open to talking to me again, write me back. Hit me with a message on Getting Out app, gettingout.com, or I can call you sometime. I tried to call you the last month, but there was no answer. So instead of blowing you up, I thought I'd just shoot you a letter and let you know where my head's at, and want to see where yours is. Anyways, the ball is in your court. So hopefully I'll hear from you soon. Sincerely, David. P.S. I'm going to send you a picture. There's a picture included. And I want you to see what you've been missing. You're listening to The Reengineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I am your host, Todd Laments the Extrovert, and I am joined by researcher, writer, and introvert Joe Anthony.
Hello. And when you say researcher, I just want to not distance myself, but just to point the credit at you, because this letter
you want to get off the that was cold. For you that don't know Joe and I, he's definitely the pro researcher, and I took the lead on this because, like I said in the beginning, this letter came to me, and so he's better at it. He's been doing it for longer. He's better at it. So this was interesting to me, and I called you when I got this letter. To get a letter from the Oregon Department of Corrections inmate, it kind of startles you right off the bat. And what stood out to me was it was just written in impeccable handwriting. You could tell someone took a lot of time and detail in this. And how many years has it been since you've seen the letter? It's been a while, right?
Yeah, I think I accidentally found one in the street. That's the only thing I could think of that wasn't an email.
Now, I am an absolute documentary nerd and geek, and I love murder documentaries. Any kind of true crime. I love the ID channel. You come over, it's usually on. And I even joke about it, that for me to get more content to watch, more people are going to have to be murdered.
Right.
Now, growing up as a kid, I used to always read nonfiction, these murder stories. And I don't know if you remember these books. They're these big, thick books. And then in the middle section, there would be these glossy photos. Do you remember those?
Yeah. I used to get them from, school, basically. Like middle school, I used to hand them out.
And so when I couldn't understand, when I was single, I go through stretches in my life where I've been single. I go through long, dry stretches. And when I watch a lot of these documentaries, these serial killers, these men who have done horrible things, Joe, they have girlfriends and wives, and they're beautiful. And I'm like, what? I have a job, and I'm a nice guy, and I'm on the outside?
Right.
It used to piss me off, and I'd be jealous of them.
It's like those lucky bastards behind bars.
Exactly. They're having these conjugated visits and having a lot better life than I am. So it's bothered me. So today I'm talking about some myths. The first one being, these women must be twisted who fall in love with these prisoners. They don't know what true love is. They're mentally weak. They're unattractive. They're lonely. We, the listeners, would never ever fall for a prisoner. Now, another myth. These men are desperate and lonely. They're lost puppies. They'll give attention to anybody. There is no such thing as true love in prison. How could they be in love? They don't even know each other. They're strangers. Final bonus fact. We'll share how you can utilize some of these techniques prisoners use to craft their love letters.
So, Todd, I had a quick question for you. When you were reading that letter, I tried to imagine the woman who's receiving that. And the drama of that letter, the part that sticks out to me is he's getting out. And he's basically reaching out to somebody he had been pen pals with. That, to me, is the part where if you in real life aren't actually interested in a relationship, where you don't want to continue it after they get out, that's the freak out moment, right? Like that's the moment where they're getting out, they're reaching out to you, they want to meet you.
You get a calendar out, right? Like, yeah. It seemed like a good idea until it's really happening.
Right, somebody's buying door locks, basically. Like somebody's like, I imagine 7 chains and like 19 deadbolts on a door at this moment.
Now, as a lifelong salesperson, that's a great point, by the way, Joe, but the thing that stuck out to me was like he broke contact with this woman. He kind of fell off the face of the earth. He says he was in a fight or in a hole.
Right.
I was kind of, as a salesperson, what we do is we do follow-up, like of leads that are not good leads.
Right.
So I'm thinking like he found some other girl. That didn't work out. Now he's re-looking her back up.
Right. And
that's how I felt in my heart right away.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the best excuse for I fell off is I was literally put into a hole.
Yeah, it's a pretty good excuse, right?
Right.
And with not me, I don't want to go into it right now.
Right.
That usually means it's a lie.
Yeah, I don't want to discuss this. So my question to you is, how do I start mailing with a pen pal in prison?
Well, on my world-class research, worldwide, there's over 40 websites and resources to meet.
So I've got choices.
In the olden days, in what used to happen, you used to have to. They get relationships with prisoners were usually staff at the prison, sometimes prison guards, but usually teachers or nurses or people who came in and they'd meet somebody, kind of like we talked about. How can you be in love with someone you haven't even met? So they would get to meet them.
Right.
But now there's websites to me, they look like dating websites. They look like Match.com and eHarmony. It shows a picture of the person and they're men or women, and you get to pick the race and the age and when they're getting out. That's a new filter. You know what I mean? Because if you want someone to have sex with next week, you know, for 5 years, you want to wait 5 years. So you know.
I want that for a normal dating website. Like, when are you available? When are you going to be released?
Yeah. And they have apps now on phones that help you call. There's all kinds of different contacts things. So this, to me, Joe, reminds me of like a long distance relationship. And I've been in some, and in some ways, they're the best relationships.
Right.
They're exciting. It's real lovey-dovey. It's very romantic. You're not in that day-to-day grind that you have with your partner about paying the bills and this and that. It's just all love. It's all fantasy.
Right. Plus, if you get into an argument, it's not like it's the argument that continues from the car to the bedroom to the living room. It's literally a letter ends. So your argument ends when you stop writing.
Or you hang up the phone. Yeah.
Right.
There's a pause button. I want you to go over something for me. It's called Hybristophilia. And it's if a prison can really have true love.
Okay, so Hybristophilia. We're gonna do this old like we're in elementary school preparing for a book report. This is how we're gonna do this. So we're gonna break down the word first. Hybristophilia. Philia comes from the Greek word meaning love for. So like there's a lot of types of diagnoses for types of love. Philia is usually in that word. If you just think of like any type of diagnosis on sexual deviations. Hybristo comes from the Greek word meaning to commit an outrage against somebody. So you're in love with someone who has committed outrages. So prisoners, basically, or people who have done wild things to society. Also known as Bonnie and Clyde syndrome, because as Americans, we associate pretty much any kind of attraction to prisoners and heinous behavior. We look at Bonnie and Clyde. Now, I went with Psychology Today for our source today, just for this definition. They talk about how hybristophilia is more common among females, which is bizarre for individual behaviors that are considered deviant sexually. And it comes in different forms. There's a passive and an aggressive version of hybristophilia. So if you're sitting at home and you're thinking, "Oh my God, I might have this," like if you watch the show Prison Break, and you're looking at these handsome male models who are doing the acting, and you're like, "Oh no, maybe I've got this." You can take some solace in that hybristophilia is not the same across the board for everybody. So the passive hybristophilia is the Netflix watcher who is enjoying a bit too much these criminal these bios, basically. Mm-hmm. So passive is people who have no desire to take part in the criminal activity, the murder or rape or the offenses that they've performed, even if it's minor crimes. It can be attraction towards somebody who has made something egregious but not necessarily violent. So these people will usually defend a prisoner. So if they fall in love with somebody, they will end up, it's your friends will get tired of you because you're always like, well, let me tell you about how they're not guilty. Like you come up with arguments and you try to defend the person that you're in love with, and you look for ways that they're the victim.
But through my readings, they actually start to believe it.
Right, exactly.
They believe that they really didn't do it, or they're not that person anymore. Yes, they did this terrible thing, but we all make mistakes.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of savior complex in hybristophilia, especially this passive, it seems to me. And then we have the aggressive hybristophilia, which is really where we get into Bonnie and Clyde. That's somebody who actively helps to commit crimes. That includes possibly luring victims, hiding bodies, covering the crimes itself, or committing violent acts or crimes. These people are attracted to the lover because of their violent actions. So in a aggressive hybristophilia, that means somebody who is attracted to and wants to participate in the crimes.
So that's what you hear about someone that says, this person helped me bury a body. Like, why would you do that? Why would you go drive to their house when you know that that's what's going on and get involved in any way? Why would that be a good idea? They just can't help it.
Right. In court, when you're watching like true crime and somebody's like, well, the girlfriend lied for them to the cops or something,
it's like shocking. Like, why,
Right. Why would you try to cover that? Well, that's aggressive hybristophilia. That's they're into them because they have a criminal element to them. And then, of course, we ask the question: could anyone fall for a prisoner, or not a prisoner, but a somebody who commits violent acts or crimes? So the idea that could anyone fall into hybristophilia? Now, this is just opinion based on our research, but we kind of already aggrandize aggressive behavior. I mean, like if you watch movies with action stars, like you've seen the movie Die Hard?
Yes.
So we kind of look at people who are aggressive or who are able to do violence, and we all sort of look at that and we say that's what attraction is. That could be the start of hybristophilia. Seeing somebody who is aggressive and capable of murder effectively.
Is that the ultimate bad boy?
Exactly.
Is that someone who's like not just some kid acting up in class, but somebody who will protect me? A provider, protect. No one's going to mess with me if I have a murderer on my team.
Right, exactly. It's you've picked the most badass dodgeball person in the history of evolution.
Yeah. Well, my boyfriend really will kill you.
Right.
He's done it before.
Right. He's literally murdered before. That trumps my boyfriend is a football player. And then, of course, there are websites that cater to prisoner dating, as you've stated. So this is a combination where you don't have to worry if you're attracted to prisoners on TV. You have to worry if you start taking action. When your actions have consequences, that's when we start looking into maybe you're getting into hybristophilia. And, of course, that leads me to asking, what does it look like when hybristophilia has consequences?
Well, I have a story for you. There's an Australian study. It's the Wilcox Bailey's book, Dream Lovers, Women Who Marry Men Behind Bars. It tells a story, an awful story, about a pair of middle-aged religious Christian sisters, Avril and Rose, who walked out on their long-term marriages. They were calling them boring, to marry two men who were in prison. Avril's new love was in jail for a series of property offenses. But within a week of his release, he bludgeoned Avril to death with a hammer. Now Rose, she married a man who had killed his previous wife. She was saying she had no fear at all. He went back to jail after he got out, after he attacked Rose, tried to cut off her ear, and pull out her teeth with pliers.
So that doesn't happen on eHarmony very often.
Exactly. And that's, people say you think, oh, they're asking for it. It's like, can you even imagine? I don't like going to the dentist, having my teeth pulled out with pliers. Can you imagine?
Right.
Jeez
Well,
Louise.
sounds like something they do in like a Russian gulag or something.
Yeah, that's consequences for you.
Right.
She's the one that, yeah.
I don't want to make light of anyone's suffering.
No.
But if we went for the biggest example of consequences and dangers, we probably couldn't have done better. I mean, that almost, it's life is stranger in fiction kind of moments.
Well, that's the thing too. I think these were women who were grounded, were families, had kids. They walked away from comforts and at the same time, it had this dual effect.
Right, they were quite literally looking for the excitement we were talking about, that rush, and wow, what a way for that to end up. And I hate to. It's a weird way to look at this, but if you're the boring guy that somebody leaves, and then that happens, that's got to be like crushing on top of crushing.
Explain.
Okay, so imagine you work in like a desk job or something,
Yeah.
and your wife leaves you, and she says that you're too boring, and then she hooks up with a prisoner, and then later you find out that she has been bludgeoned with a hammer or attacked with pliers. That I don't know how you recover from that. Like that's insane.
Yeah, it's terrible. The mother of your child, and yeah.
Right. So, I want to kind of ask another question. This is all the podcast is, by the way, is like me quietly asking questions and then you shocking me with these weird facts you found. So, we're going to talk a little bit about whether or not these guys are predators. I mean, like we're trying to move away from generalizations, I think, because most of the stories I found online, and I think most of the stories you found, are about how Hybristophilia turns bad. That it's people putting on an act, so specifically sociopaths in prison putting on an act so that they can sucker people into being pen pals and eventually lovers or potentially supporters of them. So I was wondering, do you have some examples of people like this? I've got a couple, and I think you've got a couple. So what are we looking at? What are like the high profile cases of this?
There's every single one. And we always look for stuff that not everyone's heard. The no does.
Right.
And that's why I didn't put in any Ted Bundy stuff. But the guy had thousands of groupies.
Of course, yeah.
There was a line of women to marry him. But some well-known ones, Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, he killed 13 people. He got married in a waiting room. Scott Peterson, there's been all these documentaries at.
Mm-hmm.
He was being proposed by 18-year-old beautiful young women the day, and he's a good-looking guy, and he got all this fame. And there is a percentage of these I want to put out there that are doing it for a book deal,
right,
for their own documentary, for purely attention and financial gain. That's it.
Right.
But it's not a high percentage. It's a small percentage. Who do you have?
Okay, so first off, I want to talk a little bit about the serial killers, because that's a different brand of Hybristophilia, or it's a different brand of pen pal. Usually when we look at prison letters, the vast majority are not these high-profile cases. So you remember the Boston Marathon bomber, the Johar Tsarnaev?
The long-haired kid, yeah, I do.
Right. So, not a serial killer, still quote unquote a bad boy, if we're looking at this from the scope of attractiveness if you have hybristophilia, and that's somebody we sort of like became an idol. Like, you remember that Rolling Stone cover where he's like, laid back. He looks like a poster you would have on your college wall if you were a girl, like if you were in like
a Russian boy band.
Right, exactly. So we're gonna not. I mean, he had insane amounts of Twitter followers, and the following he gained after that was incredible. So we're gonna look at that as an exception, not the rule to hybristophilia. And same thing with the serial killers. It's a phenomenon that they get so much of a following, and I think you're right that some of them, some of their followers, the women who are groupies for them, they're doing it for publicity. But there's something else that I also want to mention is a lot of these serial killers, they're not what we think of as like criminal masterminds. Like movies like Dexter and Silence of the Lambs have convinced us that these serial killers are brilliant and that they're manipulating these women, that they're so good at getting into the human mind, that they're these intelligent sociopaths.
Silence of the Lambs stuff, yeah.
Right, exactly.
I don't think that's it.
No, it's not. They've done studies trying to pin down this, like what makes serial killers so good at evading police, what makes them so good at manipulating people. And the average IQ of the serial killer, according to the FBI and Business Insider, is 94.5. And a lot of them fall under that average. So when you're looking at serial killers, they're not the brilliant Hannibal geniuses.
They're dumb dummies.
They're can be dummies, but oftentimes it's because they're bold and that they have, not that they have nothing to lose, but they act like it. And so a lot of their crimes go unsolved for a long time simply because they have the gall to do it and repeat it. So
they don't overthink it.
Right. So when they get these groupies, it's not because they're sliding into the minds of people and manipulating them. It's because they're being reached out to.
Well, I have another one, Henry Lee Lucas, and he was known. He confessed to over 100 murders, but he had a very low IQ. But there was a woman on the outside that actually got involved, contacted the police, and tried to make an alibi for him after the fact, after he was already convicted. And so her whole thing, and she went to a lot of trouble saying she was a certain person living in a different city. She did a lot of research.
Wow.
To try to get him out of prison, because if he didn't do that, maybe he didn't do these other ones. There's going to be this domino effect.
Right.
The police they were getting some traction on it, and it was making sense to them, and they started to re-interview him and reopen the investigation. And then it turned out she'd been in similar relationships with other serial killers across the country.
Wow.
So she's a prime example.
So she has this pattern of attraction so much that she has tried to get other serial killers out of jail.
Yeah, and go that much trouble. I mean,
so there's a type. You're saying that this isn't like a common kink that people have. It really is like a full on. Once you have this, it's part of your psyche.
It's an obsession, or it's a really unhealthy hobby.
Okay.
Very unhealthy, dangerous.
So, a little bit of when you sent me this research, we started this podcast joking that our research differs, our styles differ.
I'm a very low IQ person compared to Joe, too, just for the record.
I've never taken an IQ test, so I can't confirm
You're
or deny.
You're a pretty smart cat, man, I'll tell you. You're well-read, I'll put it that way.
Well-read, yeah. A lot of time on my hands. I think that actually might be more accurate. But one of the things I wanted to do is a lot of your notes were high-profile cases. And so I went the opposite. With my stuff that I checked into, aside from the definition, I went low. I wanted to know what the reality of these cases are. So the third myth that we have, and the part that we're going to bust, is that there's no true love in prison. So first I want to know, where do you land on this? Like if you read that letter, does that sound like true love to you?
No. It sounds like I'm just trying to get something. I'm trying to get something out of it. I'm manipulating. That's how it came off to me.
Right. I'm glad you said it, because it did feel like that to me, and I didn't want to be the heartbreaker here. But I went looking for this. I want to find statistics on how many people actually like get married in prison, or how would you know if it was true love? How many of these are manipulations?
Well, I used to think the same thing about arranged marriages, and it turns out that they have a lot of success in lots of cultures, way more success than we have in our own culture. So
Yeah, when they do self-reporting on arranged marriages, they always report higher amounts of prosperity, and that's
Yeah.
yeah. And that's all I could really find for prison marriages. Is it was self-reporting from couples who had been married, and of course their self-reporting is going to be skewed because they're reporting on something very subjective. So because of that, because everything we have today is going to basically be anecdotal, that we don't have really solid numbers on all this, I just figured we'd go through the scenarios. When is it true love? When is it a scam? How can you spot each? How can you participate in each? I mean, not that you'd want to participate in a scam. So we're going to go anecdote to anecdote, and we're going to talk about what you can get into. So first off, is this the love that I'm feeling? True love in prison letters can be an absolute scam. If you go to Google and you start looking for prison scams that happen from in prison, it is your internet will explode. There's so many scams going on from in American prisons. One that I want to talk about is one that actually happened to me. Like, I experienced this and I didn't know it was a prison scam. So there's a scam going around, and has been for the last couple of years. It's a scam that I experienced. My aunt got called up just out of the blue, and this has been happening around Oregon, where they call and they tell you that you owe money, or that you've done something wrong with your taxes, or you haven't appeared in prison court after being called for jury duty. And they try to fine you. Like, they tell you that, a sheriff or cop will come by to pick you up, and you have to serve, a day in jail or something. They'll give you some unspecified number.
They've got it down, so it sounds pretty legit.
Right. It sounds like something that might actually, be a violation of some sort. And the only thing you have to do to avoid going to jail temporarily is you pay money to, the local system. They tell you usually it's like a court or a police station, and they tell you just go pay money into this ATM, or pull a prepaid card and go to this ATM. And usually it's attached to something that's official.
Okay.
Like it's
government
not the
building of some
right. It's an ATM outside of a government building, or on the same block as a police station, and so it feels almost legit.
That's pretty clever.
Yeah, no, it's smart, and my reaction was not smart. I told them, call the sheriff, bring him here. So I did not react well, and the guy on the other line was, they sounded like a telemarketer, like they had canned answers, which was very smart.
So they do this out of jail. They do this with their phones and just figure out.
Absolutely, that was the shocking part to me. I went and I Googled for this when I was looking for prison scams, and I clutched my pearls when I saw that this happened. This scam specifically was a prison scam, so I got prison scammed. But they had phones that they had trafficked into prison, prepaid cell phones, and they were running these out of prison, and they were making the Oregon guy. It said he made like $1 million doing this.
Oh, wow! So this is lucrative.
Lucrative, yeah. And I do realize that this scam that I'm talking about is not a love letter, but that's to say that there are lots and lots of scams coming out of prisons, some of them so complex that they make national news, and that they make a ton of money, and it involves, phones and things like that.
Well, I have one that, have you ever read the book by John Grisham, The Brethren?
No, I haven't.
Okay, what the book is about is it's a group of men who are in prison, and what they do is
it's the judges that go to prison, right?
That's right. They're 5 judges, and they're all smart, educated guys, and they want to make some money. So what they do is they take pictures of the most handsome, well-built prison men, young men, and then they reach out to men as pen pals who are in regular heterosexual marriages, who are well established, they're bankers or CEOs, and they get them to say inappropriate things of a homosexual manner, and then they extort and blackmail.
Oh, wow.
It's a great book. It's very entertaining. Now, being that I'm a geek about documentaries, a few years ago, thinking this was all fiction, right? It's a real good story. These judges, Joe, it wasn't fiction. You know, all good fiction's based on a true story. There's a true story of guys who were in prison in the South who were doing that, and again making hundreds of thousands of dollars in extortion money. Yeah.
So that was the seed of the fiction.
Yeah, it was almost verbatim. It was pretty darn close. I mean, there's some things that are different, but
right.
You know where he got it.
Right.
There's no way he thought of that and that just happened to happen.
Right. It wasn't a fabrication. Yeah, he got it from somewhere.
Yeah.
Well, that's the one I'm finding the most of as far as prison letters go, is the love scams. They usually don't end in blackmail. What they end with is the prisoner asking for cash for part of their processing. So they'll say that it's for appeals or for they're paying off a lawyer. Okay, here's one. 67-year-old from Orange County, a widow spent $3,000 and sold her basically her home to bankroll a prisoner who said he needed to pay off legal fees. And of course, this ended up coming out to be like $30,000 in total. Like she got blackmailed, and then this, like there was a huge tied up scandal, and they tried to hit her with fines and things. But basically, what it comes down to, the majority of these scams, when you get a prison letter, it talks about love, like you're falling in love with somebody. If it's a scam, they end up asking for money for processing and court fees and attorney fees and things like that. That was by and large the biggest, most prevalent scam. It's not these group cell phone scams that I'm seeing. A lot of the research has led me to, one anecdote after another of somebody paying somebody's fees. There's another one in October 4th of 2005. A woman named Karen Ann Erdley. She was a state prisoner sentenced to a maximum term of 5 years in a federal prison to, ironically, a conspiracy to commit mail fraud. And then while she was in there...
People don't change.
Right, yeah, exactly. That the prison did not immediately reform her of mail fraud. Because while she was in there, she got a group of women, a dozen female prisoners, and they started basically a letter writing campaign to men. And they got 224 men, and they scammed them of over $220,000. So Erdley herself personally defrauded her victims of $100,000, which she was ordered to repay. So it's not just men. I want to point that out. This is my best anecdote for... not only do men scam people from prison with love letters, it can happen from women's prisons too.
Wanted to digress on what you were talking about before, kind of just to bring that point up again, is they'll say a lot of times it's that I'm in here, I'm innocent. So you think you're helping this person. They say they're innocent. I need this for for another attorney. I need to get this. And we think, okay, we're going to help and there's a lot of sympathy for people, with DNA things coming up and people being wrongfully convicted, right?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of ground to stand on when you are messaging somebody from prison. There's a lot of I'm innocent or there's a complication in my case. A lot of people find pen pals online or find lovers online, and they find out later that because of the way court records work, they could be talking to somebody who they thought did a much less serious crime. And the only one that the prisoners admitted to is something that was tangentially related to a much worse crime.
Well, can you touch on this? I read through some of your notes, and you were talking about that the writing's a real human connection, that it's like volunteer work. Can you kind of explain that to me?
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up, because the flip side of this. See, if somebody listens to this podcast, so far all they will get is... It can be a scam. It can be frightening. It can lead to a prisoner coming after you. And if you're into this, then you might be mentally unwell. The flip side, and the one I would absolutely encourage everyone to go look into.
You have a disease that no one else has. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you have something wrong with your brain. But that's not always the case. Is you're not always going to be conned by one of these chameleons who can letter write to anybody and get their letters workshopped by their group. A lot of people in prison, they don't get letters at all. So you have these scammers sending letters out. You also have the opposite, where you've got these overcrowded prisons, and you've got prisoners who don't communicate with the outside world at all during their sentence. Whether it's because they were in a lonely place before they went in, or because their families have stopped talking to them since they went in. You get these situations where prisoners are basically desperate for human connection, and they don't get it because they're not sending out letters. Like they're not scamming anyone. They're not looking for people.
They just need some love, some attention.
Right, exactly, and to feel continuously connected with humanity. And that's where volunteer work, specifically letter writing as a volunteer work, can be very, very useful. One place I would try to point people to is there's a Guardian article about, I think it's writing for human connection can be very rewarding. I don't think that's the actual title, but that's the headline. So if you Google that, it'll come up. But it's writing for prison letters. You find so many heartwarming stories, and you hear about people who have been doing it for years, and they talk about the prisoners they've communicated with and how they pull for these guys. Love is not involved. They're not doing this because they're looking for a partner. They're just doing it because they want to connect with somebody on a human level, and they want someone to root for.
Well, and on topic too, you being a member of Toastmasters, you visited the state prison, right?
I did. I
what was that experience like?
Coffee Creek. It can be rewarding and heartbreaking and very interesting. The people I talked to there, it was a women's prison, and I was there in official capacity to help them set up or continue their club. They did not need me, by the way. I want to start by saying they were so good at setting everything up and communicating and running their own show. We were just there basically to give them a thumbs up and say you're doing everything right.
But what they're doing is a communication public speaking class to get better, to become better communicators, to be more hireable when they get out.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So it's plus positive stuff.
Absolutely positive. And everything they said revolved around the idea that communicating and keeping in contact with the outside means that they have something to care for. Like they continue. It's really easy for them to get, they call it being in barrier or in walls, or they start building up this idea that they're not connected to humanity anymore, that the outside world really doesn't care. And it's easy to fall into that trap if you're in prison.
And we don't want people to think that, because I personally know multiple people who have gone to prison for murder, manslaughter, whatever, involved in something, get out, and now I would trust them with my own life. They're
right.
Just good, solid people. They made a mistake,
right?
And they made a big mistake, but that wasn't all they are. We wouldn't all want to be judged on our worst day, right?
Right, and these people aren't like bombs. We don't want to cut them like a wire and just set them aside. We want them to feel connected while they're doing their time, because we want them to come back to society at some point. And if they don't feel like
and not
they
be
can,
so angry and so
right.
temped up that they're going to pull our teeth out with pliers.
Right, exactly. We want them to come back and say, "Hey, I got your letter, thanks." Like,
I changed the names in this letter that I read, by the way, so I wouldn't get my ass kicked.
Oh, okay.
He knows where I live.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't have to avoid your house then. I was going to stay away until this
Yeah,
guy,
exactly.
until we saw the news.
Okay, now we're on to the bonus section. How to try to craft a prison letter. Now, share with me what you showed me before when you're doing research on this, about how the YouTube.
Okay.
That's cracked me up. I can't believe you found this.
I was really looking for how to craft a letter as if you are a prisoner.
And there weren't any.
There weren't any.
Which is crazy, because there's information about everything.
Right. Lots of prisoners have like webcam shows talking about how they got bulky, like how they got built in prison. Lots of those. I did find
it's this underground something.
Right.
Which makes our show more interesting, because we're the only one covering it.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There were a lot of videos about wives who talked about how to send letters to prison. Okay. And a couple of those had information on what they looked for in prison letters. There was like a couple of people complaining about how their men always sent back letters that were complaints about the commissary and complaints about other prisoners and complaints about doing time. So very, very sort of like cold, mundane day to day, almost like what you'd have in the outside world, where it's like work sucked, I didn't have a good day, boss doesn't like me. That except in bars. So
Okay.
So we want to look at I want techniques.
So they're sharing their day. They're doing the feedback like you would in a regular relationship.
Right. But what we really want is like the letter you read, where it's like it has interesting points. It talks about the relationship. It talks about connection.
Well, this is like a team writing thing. I look at it like you have a really successful writer who has a group of writers who write his own stuff. James Patterson has a ghostwriters that work for him.
Okay.
And so they all sit down together, and they have a lot of time on their hands, and this is lucrative, and it involves attention from women and gifts. So they get benefits of it financially, emotionally, and then they get some attention, for sexual interest.
Right.
So they spend a lot of time on this, and certain people get better at doing certain things. So let's say David is really good at penmanship, and then Roger's older, so he has more life experience, a little bit more romantic. And then they keep writing these letters. Well, if you write letters all day, every day, what do you get? You get better at it, right?
Right.
And then you start noticing what works. You notice that, when I said this kind of lovey-dovey stuff, I got a better reaction. So they start with rough drafts. These guys start as real amateurs, and then they become professional letter writers, which we know is a lost art.
Right. I noticed in that letter there were very, very few mistakes. Like it was handwritten, but it looked like it was printed in somebody's handwriting. Like it looked insane.
Yeah, it's like you wouldn't have time to do this. You'd have to really sit down and take an hour or so to just do the writing part. Not the writing part, just the penmanship part.
Right. So that's our first takeaway. From what I think I'm hearing from you is take your time, workshop your ideas. So like bounce these ideas off, people you know.
Seek the counsel of other men, like we do when we do any kind of write a speech or you write one of your stories.
Right.
You resonate, you work on it, you rehone it, you get it better.
Right. I have like half a dozen people that I send it out to, and they come back and they say, this doesn't work, or this character doesn't work, or that, except a love letter, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking.
Okay, and then we also want to. You said like you're thinking like a couple of hours. How many hours do I need to put into a love letter?
Well, being a professional writer, you are. They're not just writing the love letters; they're trying to kind of hook these people into relationships.
Right.
To get, and I'm not. We're going right now. I'm talking about the negative side, and we already said that that's not everyone's them, but the ones that do come off is I want to fall in love a little too fast.
Okay.
A little too much, like this one reaching out to somebody who I haven't heard from you in a year. Now all of a sudden you want to see me. That's kind of weird, right?
Right. So you don't want to say sorry I didn't talk to you for a year. You want to build interest, basically.
You do, and you want to make a connection with them. As a salesperson, how do we get people to like us? We take genuine interest in them. So a lot of these letters are going to be crafted with, oh, wow, you're such an amazing mom, and you do so much, and you don't know how much this is doing for me and how hard my life is here. They'll do the sympathy card because you want to feel like you're helping somebody. That fulfills the person on the outside, but it also draws the relationship in.
Right.
And I think when someone's writing you a letter, when I write someone an email, I think that's doing something for them. But for me to sit down and write a letter to somebody, I don't know. I'd have to have some kind of interest.
Right. Yeah.
Or some kind of need I'm trying to fill.
Yeah, you're already invested if you're putting pen and ink to a paper.
Right. Like it's 1980 and 88,
Right. Dearest Eleanor. That's how my prison letters are going to start. And if you want, you can pretend you're behind bars while you're writing this. It might improve things.
I can't help but thinking if they work this hard in just a regular job,
right.
They make $100,000 a year. Easy.
Yeah, apply
they rehoned any skill, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now most episodes, Todd takes us out by just talking about what we learned today. Because we went in almost like a reverse episode where he did the research and I got to kick back and just think about the lessons of the day.
He did a great job on the research.
So what I've learned from this is, first off, if we have Hybristophilia, then We want to seek professional help, yes?
Yes, and there's probably a specialist. There's probably it's a very $1,000 an hour psychologist in Boston, or they're not going to be everywhere. They're going to be experts on this. It's not like addiction, okay?
Right. Okay.
I don't know that.
So attraction to prisoners, not something you have to worry about unless you put it into action, like Avril and Rose. Then we have to be careful. Wanting and needing somebody is not mental weakness. If you're looking for an inmate and that's where you're getting your need filled, also fine. That's not mentally ill. That's seeking a human who may be unavailable in that moment. So maybe take a look at why you're doing that and if you fall into the category of hybristophilia. These letters that you receive, whether it's a scam or not, whether it's a group scam or an individual sending you letters, consider what is the benefit they're asking for. If you're looking at a letter and you're thinking, am I getting scammed? Always ask, am I paying for something? Are they asking me to pay for something? Because on the flip side of that, you may just be the last human connection somebody has. So be wary of scams, but also if you are that human connection, then you're a hero. Keep doing what you're doing.
And if you're being honest with yourself, you'll know the truth. Sincerity shows, true sincerity shows, and lack of sincerity always shows.
Right. I think eventually we're going to have to change our name to the Self-Awareness Podcast, because that's really the lesson that almost every podcast ends with that. But yeah, if you're recognizing what you're doing and you are being honest with yourself, then you'll know whether or not this is a problem behavior or an irrational attraction, or if you are generating real human connection. And if you need to maybe take some of these techniques, these letter writing techniques, and put them to your own life, that just means taking the time to sit and recognize a partner or somebody you want to communicate with. And as we've talked about in other podcasts, apply the golden ratio where you can. That's the golden ratio we discussed in dysfunctional relationships. That's a 5-to-1 ratio, where for every one negative thing you say to a partner, you want to couple that with 5 positives. And if you read through these prison letters, there's a lot of positives in there. It's a lot of reaching out and communicating and being positive with somebody else. That is the lesson I'm going to take away. If I could do the honor.
Please.
You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You with Joe Anthony and Todd Laments. And you got to do our tagline, please.
We don't know everything, but we do have an opinion on everything.
That's darn right. And you can find us on thereengineered.com, and you can look us up on the platforms, leave a review for us.
Yes, the best thing you can do for us, if you like this show and you know someone who loves science and loves self-help, refer us. Let us listen. Let them listen.
Or write us an old-fashioned letter, and we will get back to you within 6 months.
Yeah, we might send you some money or some naked pictures of ourselves.
Right.